So before I start, I noticed a lot of people are asking if this is going to be available after the fact. Yes, it is. So as long as you've registered, it is going to, like, all of this is being recorded, and we're actually, I think, posting it on YouTube. It's all going to be chopped up into the courses and posted on YouTube. So should get, you know, some sort of notification or something like that. Anywho, moving on. DSLR boot camp. If you guys remember, this is the legacy booth. For some of you OG owners, this is the booth you probably started with. This is the booth I started with. I have many of these booths. So this course, though, I just want to add a disclaimer. It is meant for anyone using a DSLR booth that uses an umbrella strobe as well as a DSLR. So if your photo booth that is a DSLR uses a bounce card instead, it's going to be a little bit different, okay? So let's get started. What we are going to cover today, I need to get my thing to move. So give me 1 second so I can find that window. All right, there we go. Okay, what we're going to be covering today is what is a DSLR booth, the DSLR settings, and then also shooting outdoors, because I know a lot of people have a lot of questions about that. And now with COVID, it feels like everything is outdoors, including when it's -40 here in Canada in February. People are like, I still want to set up my photo booth outdoors. Cool. All right, so the first thing I want to go over is what is a DSLR booth? All right, so a DSLR booth uses a professional DSLR camera, which is a digital single lens reflex. So back in the day when they used film, it had a little mirror and it exposed the film. So it's kind of doing the same thing except using a digital sensor. Most photo booths don't use a full frame sensor, meaning like it doesn't use a like super large, super expensive camera like a Canon 5D Mark IV. You usually use like a Rebel. So that's okay though. It's great, absolutely fantastic. We use Rebel T3Is, 6Ds in our photo booths, and we also use a Canon M50s. Canon M50 I think is my favorite though. It actually is my favorite. It does so much, and it's a beautiful camera. You can use it for a lot. Also, it has integrated lighting, meaning there is a strobe flash with an umbrella or some sort of bounce on there that is attached to it, and it also has wired printing. Generally speaking, these are Windows-based photo booths. So the Legacy actually had a DSLR Canon camera. I think it was usually the Rebel T3i is what they usually came with, a Surface Pro, and then you would have a DNP 620, or if you bought 100 years ago like I did, it started off with the DS40. DSLR cameras are really great for large groups, for outdoor events, for very dark venues where you need to light up a lot of the space, and anything that requires high quality images. So especially if you're wanting to print anything larger than like a 6x8, an 8x10, or even posters. Like we've done full posters with our DSLR booths before. So this is where you want to be using a DSLR. And then of course you have the studio quality lighting. So all these pictures, well, the bottom picture was taken with our Legacy booth, and the top you actually see our Legacy booth setup. The downside to DSLRs, there's a few. Don't get me wrong, if you started with Salsa and then moved over to DSLR, you might be like, what the hell is happening? Because Salsa is just so easy to use. And then when you go to a DSLR-based system, it's Windows-based, so you're dealing with the dreaded Windows update, you're dealing with drivers, you have to manually program everything. And a lot of the programs, it's almost like a DIY, well, it is a DIY booth, because you have one program that's running your camera, and then if you have a sharing station, you're doing something else, and you're dealing with a lot. So you do need to be a little bit tech savvy in the past to use most of these DSLR booths. And if you don't understand camera outputs, your outputs will look like absolute garbage sometimes. Oh my God, Breeze. Breeze has made me literally cry. Breeze is a DSLR program that the photo booth used to come with, and it has made me cry, actually. Okay, let's go into camera basics. 5 things you need to know about your DSLR. Aperture, shutter speed, ISO, white balance, and then your flash settings. you'll notice this picture here has a wheel that is set to M. Your camera must, 1000%. There is no other setting that exists other than that M on your camera. Do you understand? I want everyone to say, yes, I understand. So I'm going to go over these settings, and 99% of the time I use the same settings. So I'm going to go through everything, and then at the end, I'm going to give you the settings that I generally use as a nice little summary so that you can keep that. Manual mode, that M on that dial, means that you have full control of everything. And this is why you want to use this for DSLR. Ray, I agree with you. Breeze is so damn stable, but it'll still make you cry. Aperture. Aperture is what controls how much light actually enters your camera. I personally had the hardest time trying to remember what this was. So the tip I've given myself is the bigger the number, the more people that will be in focus. Because this is normally what people get taught when they see aperture. To me, a bigger hole doesn't mean 1.4. Like that's aperture 1.4, it means the hole is bigger. So that does not compute with me. If the hole is bigger, the number should be bigger. So for me, it's the number's bigger, more people are in focus. But you can use this little chart and it kind of gives you a good idea of what aperture means and how it works. Shutter speed. So your shutter speed is how fast your shutter opens and closes. And it's measured in seconds. So if you were to leave your shutter open for an entire second, it's going to make everything blurry. I'll give you an example. This is what essentially a 1 second shutter speed would look like with someone running. In 1 second, they move this far, and that's why they're so blurry. Whereas these people who are standing perfectly still look like they're in focus. How many times do people stay totally still in your photo booth? Like never. They're drunk, they're having fun, they're, you know, seeing themselves, so they're really excited. That never happens. So contrast to that is you can set your camera to something like 1/4000th of a second. That's really fast. And that's how they essentially take race car photography. So the car is moving really, really fast. And you'll see there's actually motion in the background, but the car itself is frozen in time. And that is what shutter is. So shutter is how fast your shutter is actually moving. And that also determines how much light is entered into it. So in our case, though, with these photo booths, because we are using a strobe light and we're flashing light, we have to keep our shutter speed between 1/100th of a second and 1/200th of a second. And the reason for that is that if you go higher than 1/200th of a second, you're going to get this issue where the light isn't, like the shutter speed is too fast and the light isn't fast enough that's actually capturing your shutter. Because the flash is flashing the light and essentially freezing time for you. And at that point, the shutter was still either coming up or going down, and that's why you'll get this black line. If you guys are part of the Photobooth network, you'll see a lot of people posting like, oh man, I have this black line in my photo and I don't know what's happening. Is my shutter dying? It's like, no, just bring down your shutter speed. So shutter speed. So again, we always keep ours at 1/200. That is our marker. ISO. The ISO is how sensitive the sensor is to light, and the sensor being your chip, right? The chip in your computer and in your camera, sorry. And it goes from generally from 80, and you'll see in this wheel, 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600. You could just shoot at 1600 because that is the most sensitive to light. And you're probably like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Why don't I do that? The higher your ISO goes, especially with entry-level DSLR cameras like a Rebel, which is what most people use in their photo booth, you're going to get a lot of noise. Noise is like this. This is a really great chart. I forgot to actually give reference, but this is from Petapixel. Sorry, Petapixel. But you'll see at ISO 160, this image is black. And you don't see as much of this like grain and noise. But then when you get up to 6400, like this is just a confetti party right over here. So you don't want that in your pictures at all. So that's why you want to keep your ISO low and have it around 400. I'd say max 800 for sure. We actually do keep it at 800, and then we'll sometimes move back. Right? Cameron, you like my confetti party? All right. White balance. So white balance is how you can make your pictures actually look the color they're supposed to be. For example, this image is perfectly balanced, depending on what your screen looks like. So the background is the color it's supposed to be. His skin is natural looking. The colors are bright, so there's no weird discoloration anywhere. Whereas this image you'll see is very magenta. Like the background almost looks pinky purple. So this is where you would have to do a white balance adjustment. And these are the settings that are generally set into your camera. So you have tungsten, which obviously if you don't have that really orange lighting, you'll see it's blue. And in this case, you'll notice daylight looks the best because this shot is in daylight, right? And so that's why that daylight setting looks the best. It is recommended to go to 400. Like I mentioned, you can go 400 or 800, but even at 800, like that is the max you can go. You're more than welcome to stay at 400. Like I mentioned, those two are both very good settings to keep, and we've never had an issue with 800. For Photobooth, though, we're indoors. Sometimes we have that horrendous yellow lighting that most venues think is like, I don't know if it's like a prerequisite for building a venue and you're like, where's my yellow lighting? That's the first thing we need to install because it's so bad. And then the walls of most venues are also these ridiculous colors, and the carpets are like these swirls of rainbows. So you're going to get a lot of colors coming in on your photo booth anytime that you're set up indoors. But luckily, we have this beautiful strobe light that is flashing bright, pure white light on all of your subjects. Right? I don't know who designs these venues, but they're like, where's the most hideous carpet we can find? Let us install it throughout the entire thing. Yes. Questions in the question tab, please. So for your white balance, we always stick with shade. Shade is a very neutral one, and it generally tends to get rid of all of the yellows or greens or blues that you might get normally with your flash. So if you're ever in doubt, just set your camera to shade. Flash settings. This one's pretty straightforward. Wait. Forgot there wasn't a slide there. So we always keep our flash at 100% because it's a lot easier for you throughout an event to actually move the slider on the back of your flash if you need to bring it down than it is to try and change your shutter speed or your ISO or anything like that. So we always do 100% because you can always move down afterwards easily if you need to. You also want to install your flash away because what's happening is that the flash is going to be flashing through that umbrella. It's going to lose some of the light because it is slightly translucent, but it's going to bounce back just enough light to put this like beautiful lighting that is even and super flattering. And white balance can literally, yes, white balance is super important. It can make or break your photo booth picture. Like these settings are really what's going to make you stand out as a professional photo booth company if you do DSLR, because the quality of your images makes a huge difference. So if after seeing all this information, you are like this guy, and you're like, this was too much, this was information overload, this is all you need to remember. Aperture 8.0, that means lots of people are going to actually be in focus. Shutter speed 1/200. You can go down to anything between 1/100, 1/200, but start at 1/200. ISO 800. White balance, shade, and flash settings at full power. And you're going to see just how beautiful your captures are going to be. And with this, you can have your booth set up 6 to 8 feet away from your backdrop so that you can get those large groups. Or you can get smaller people by smaller groups of people by just having them move a little bit forward, and they're still not going to be overexposed. Of course, these settings go out the window as soon as you're set up outdoors. I don't know how many times we've shown up to an outdoor event and we're like, we need a tent. And we show up and the tent is green. And that's not fun. And it's also outdoors because green will always make your subjects green. And then you really have to get fancy with your white balance settings. And Anthony, I see you're mentioning about like temperature. I didn't want to go into temperature because honestly, that is a very advanced setting. And I highly recommend that if you guys, shade isn't working for you and none of those standard settings are working for you and you really want to like nail your white balance like that, then you should definitely Google some more advanced videos on white balance because there are a lot of settings. And yes, We as a company do custom white balance settings, but I think as a rule of thumb for most events, you don't really need that. So how do you shoot outdoors? Because obviously you have the sun that's coming out, you have clouds that are coming over. Sometimes people will have their face in the sun and someone else is in the shade and you're like, this looks terrible, and there's shadows and all this other stuff. Well, I'm just going to give you the settings for shooting in the sun because I don't quite know how else to explain it. The thing you need to do is overpower the sun. That is the only option you have if you are outside in direct sunlight. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your flash, you're going to turn it around, you're going to take your umbrella off, you're going to set your aperture to 18. I know that seems crazy, but 18, everything's going to be in focus. Your shutter speed is going to be at 1/100, and your ISO is going to be at about 100. And you're going to, when you're flashing people head on, it's not going to be the most flattering light ever. You know, if you really wanted to take it one step higher, you can always get what's called a beauty dish, which is what you see in that picture. And you can actually get this cover that goes over it. So it will soften the light just a tiny bit. But the legacy booths all came with a flash that's called an Alien B, and you can purchase adapters for those things, and it's called a beauty dish. So you can purchase a beauty dish, get the smallest one they have, you can put that on front, and it'll soften the light just a little bit because you are now going to be flashing super harsh light in people's faces because you have to overpower the sun, like I mentioned before. And again, these settings are where you're going to want to start. And I would strongly suggest that if you're starting at these settings and it's still too bright, you can move your shutter speed up first, and then I would move your aperture up even higher. But obviously your ISO, you don't want to move it higher because that would just mean it was going to get brighter. Okay, I know I threw a lot at you guys, and I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions for this one because I know there's going to be a lot of questions, and I really like that dinosaur picture. So I am going to head over to the questions over here, and let's take a look. Yes, there's going to be prizes soon and an announcement I hear from someone. All right, Hella asks, can I use a light meter to set up lights indoors and outdoors? You can. That's a very advanced thing to do. If you're comfortable doing that, by all means, please do. How does your setting advice differ with a flash card? Oh, yes, you mentioned that this is specific to flash umbrellas. Yeah, so if you have a flash card, so some of the DSLR booths use a big white card that bounces flash from like a speed light. My lights just went out. And it then puts it on the subject. So you do lose a lot more light that way. So I would actually bring down your shutter speed probably, and even bring down your aperture. I usually, when I'm using a photo booth that has a bounce card, I'm using an aperture of about 5.6, shutter speed of 100, and then I'll definitely have ISO at 800. And that usually works pretty well, but I also bring the photo booth a little bit closer. Let's see which one's next. How do I know when to use my legacy and when to use my salsa? I do have both. I have many of both. I have an entire warehouse filled with these things. So they both have very different uses. We will use our legacy booth for an event where, you know, they have a lot of people, or perhaps they're looking for a studio quality image. So we do ask our clients if they're looking for just a booth that is going to be fun for them to, you know, take a GIF or a boomerang, have multiple options, live gallery, all that kind of stuff. If that's the case, then we'll use a salsa booth. But if they want studio quality prints and studio quality pictures, then we go with our legacy. If it's going to be large groups, we go with our legacy. If it's going to be a large setup and we know that the photo booth has to be really far away, maybe it's an intricate setup with like a couch, anything like that, legacy, like Santa photos, legacy, that kind of stuff. What white balance setting do you use for white backdrops? Oh man, the white backdrops, right? Like are a bit of a nightmare sometimes. The white backdrops are interesting. We will still use shade, but sometimes they might come out a little pink. If that's the case, your camera does have an advanced white balance adjustment setting where you can actually go in and it looks like WP or WB, and then it has a plus, slash, and a minus. So that's what the setting button looks like. And in there, you'll see a grid that has pink, green, blue, and yellow. So normally the dot is in the middle. So if you have too much pink, you move that little dot 1 or 2 down to the green. And that is usually all you need to perfectly get a white. Only do that though if you absolutely have to, because honestly, that is a very advanced photography thing. You can also look at getting gray cards and doing custom white balance, but you'll have to Google a YouTube on how to do that for your camera because every camera is different. Can you use mirrorless cameras? Yes, actually, we have slowly started replacing all of our DSLR, like Canon Rebels, with Canon M50s. So I think we've done 6 or 7 of our booths so far with Canon M50s. I think, what software do I use? On my legacy booth, I currently use Breeze, but I hired someone to program them for me after I've learned it inside and out. It's a very stable software, but it is very complex. Other ones that I have heard are really good and easy to use is, you know, like DSLR Booth or Social Booth used to be the stable, but I would highly recommend you stay away from that one. It's not stable. What do I charge for legacy for 3 hours? Oh boy, I was gonna get the comments going again. Our starting rate for a 3-hour legacy booth with prints is $1,699. Yep, okay. Will these camera settings work with the Mirror Me selfie booth? I have literally zero experience with a mirror booth. I've never ever purchased one. So unfortunately, I do not know because I don't know the setup. And quite frankly, I'm a little bit confused about having the camera behind the glass and how that all works. So I'm sorry I can't answer anything about mirror booth. But yeah, I've never owned one. I've never gotten into the mirror booth. I'm sorry. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything in the chat because I know some of you guys were posting in there. Have you used a black backdrop instead of white? Alicia or Alicia? I'm sorry, I think it's Alicia. I have a problem with backdrops. We have over 50 backdrops, probably more. We just have 50 on our website. So yeah, I have experienced using it with every single backdrop known to mankind, I feel like. So black is actually a really hard one also to get, like a pure black, and that's where you might want to play with your camera settings to add a little bit of contrast. Again, you can get really crazy when it comes to DSLR booths, and that's the beauty of the manual setting, is that you can take care of everything, contrast, you know, saturation of your photo, all that kind of stuff. But if you're just starting out, like, please just kind of stick to something and only make changes if you have done your research, because you can easily mess up your camera as well, especially because like I mentioned, DSLR booths are very DIY. You need to figure stuff out yourself. Only there was an easier way. But yes, let me just go through here. Do you tweak your DSLR profile settings? Great question, George. We do actually have a user-generated setting where we do, like for our Rebels, the SL1, I did always find that they shot a little bit soft, like the focus was a little bit soft. So we always sharpen them 7, and then we do add 1 of contrast for the most part in our photos. But other than that, we just use like the basic settings that are in there. If you show me the pay stub for $1,699, I'll quit my full-time job and work for you. I can show you 20 that we did last weekend for way more than that. So, okay. All right, I think we are going, oh, Amanda. Oh, Amanda. All right. So I think we're good on questions. I hope I didn't miss any of them. I'm going to go back one more time and check because I'm being told there are a few more. Okay. What lens do you use most often? I honestly use the kit lens. I rarely ever have changed out to a prime or a zoom, well, like a higher end zoom. The kit lens that it comes with is more than enough for Photobooth. The only time I'll switch out to like a higher price zoom lens is if, you know, we're printing on like poster size or something like that. Then I might also, you know, go to a prime to do like a portrait style booth. So something like that Kim Kardashian style glam booth, we call it glam booth, and it's probably the most popular photo booth we have. especially for 2022. We have 39 weddings on the books for next year already, and 22 of those are glam booths. So that's a lot of glam boothing. But something like that, because you're only having like 2 people, like you could really go that extra step and like get a nice 50 on there and do a little bit of a shallower depth of field if you really want to get artsy on that. James says, I feel like my packages are underpriced compared to yours. I'm charging between $250 to $1,000, but I live in a college town. Majority of my clients are university groups with limited budgets. Should I feel bad that I'm not charging as much? No, you shouldn't feel bad that you're not charging as much. I mean, everyone is going to be different. The thing that I just want to make sure that everyone realizes is that whatever you are charging, make sure that you're making money. You need to know what your hard costs are. $250, I can't imagine you're making any money for yourself or actually covering costs for your website or anything like that. And I think the other thing is too, is that people don't realize that, you know, not everyone will be able to afford a photo booth. I'm not saying that there's not a package that you could sell out there for $250. Like I could totally see a drop-off booth that literally has zero customization whatsoever, going for something like maybe $450 for a couple of hours, where you drop it off. There's literally no programming that goes into, you select like the salsa profile and you go, and that's pretty much it. You know, but we also spend a ton of time testing. We do design. There's a lot that goes into our packages. So you can never compare yourself to another company. I'm going to tell you guys what I charge because you're asking me. It's not on my website, but I'm more than happy to share that information with you. And, you know, you need to do you need to make sure that you're making money. We do have a calculator in Photobooth Supply Co. on their website under the freemiums. There is a course called How to Price Your Photo Booth. If you download that, there is a spreadsheet that helps you figure out what your costs are and how much you need to charge to actually make money, because you're not in business to not make money, right? You're in business to make money, so you want to make sure that you pay yourself.